All right, welcome to this week's episode of Soundtrack of Your Life. Now, all my guests on the show so far have been brilliant in terms of sharing their stories and life experiences with music and such, but this is probably one of my most favourite shows yet. On this week's show is Brian Campbell. So for those of you who don't know, Brian is like the sort of master coach to coaches. He helps people along with their coaching journey with like new strategies and things to try out and advice and all this kind of thing. But on top of that, he's a big music fan and even writes and plays his own music. But this episode was filled with stories, emotions, bands that I happen to resonate with. But when you listen to it, the conversation just flowed really well, and I think it makes for a great listen. And even in our sort of follow-up show that I do on Clapper, that went into another hour as well, which unfortunately it doesn't let you record. Otherwise, we would have had a bonus episode to share with you all. But for now, you've got this 1 hour of brilliant conversation to watch or listen to, depending on where you are. If you are a fan of primarily guitar band or rock-based music, you're in for a treat. But even if you're not, as I say, Brian is such a great conversationalist and gives you so many pointers for thoughts, and it literally just makes for a great listen. So I'll stop sort of prattling on now and let you watch or enjoy this show. As a reminder, if you want to be on the show, just check out the sign up link that will be in the description or my profiles, or just message me on any social media platform to find out more. It'd be great to have you on the show as well to share your stories and share the soundtrack of your life. So without further ado, enjoy the show and feel supersonic. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to this episode of Soundtrack of Your Life. If you're new to the show, welcome on board. It's great to have you. This is the show where if you take any kind of music in your life, be they bands, songs, albums, soundtracks, theme tunes, whatever you'd like, and also take the stories, moments, events, scenarios that have happened in your life, you'll find that there's so many moments where they both intertwine. Whether that's the first song at your wedding, your song from your college days, or the song that you might cry your heart out to. We've all got stories along the way, so this is the show to share those very stories with the world. I am so honoured and thrilled to have on the show today Brian Campbell. For those of you who don't know Brian, as I've said in like the marketing for this episode, he's kind of like your master of the coaches to coaches. He kind of helps people along with their own journey in their coaching business, and is always on hand to give people advice, new thoughts, strategies, call it what you will. But also he is a big music fan, which really helps for this kind of show. And when Brian and I naturally connected with each other, we found him to be a perfect natural fit for the show. So without further ado, Brian, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and welcome to the show.
Hey Vishad, thank you for having me. And three main loves of my life: music, number one, primary. Music's the best, as Frank Zappa said. Marketing and mathematics, they're my top three, but music trumps them all. So those are three M's that have kind of defined my path.
Fantastic.
And I love the concept of this show, the soundtrack of your life. I've always viewed it that way. It's really interesting because music's what's happening during our life, right? If we're paying attention. And it really, our bond with music comes from resonating with an emotional connection with the music that, like, it resonates with what we're going through right now.
Yeah.
So as a teenage boy, expressing frustration and anger in heavy metal music resonated with me, right? Now, at different points in our life, we may or may not resonate with that. But it's like once we've made that bond, it reminds us of being 13. We're always going to have that. It's special, and it all goes into a bank of it forms our taste, right? So when we amalgamate all of the music that's ever impacted us, it creates we form a taste. We have certain preferences. So that expands our ability to enjoy and appreciate new music. And it's fascinating to ponder, fascinating to talk about.
Well, and that's the very crux of the show that you hit on, actually, that I talk about the concept of anchoring. So when you were, for those who aren't familiar with anchoring, it's a term from the world of neuro-linguistic programming, where it's the idea that you make that link, essentially bookmark, between the song, the band, whichever, to the space or moment in your life. Now, it could be with a certain person. So when you hear a song somewhere else in the world, or whenever in your life, you're like, oh, it takes you straight back to that person or moment or whichever. And First Dance at a Wedding is a typical example that I use. So that, you'll have picked the song as a couple beforehand, and when it plays, during the wedding itself, you capture everything about the moment, where it's the people, the atmosphere, the person in front of you, so that later on in life, wherever you hear it, you go straight back to, your wedding or reception evening. So as I said, we've all got the links like that. And as you said, it's a great point to make, that you form that link at that point in time, and then that might sort of evolve as you go forward, whether it's into other tastes, or, it kind of acts as a gateway to other genres, other bands, etc. We'll probably talk about, because we share, tastes in music, that certain bands in our genres open up the gateway to learn or show all kinds of other, bands and genres.
Yeah. I love how you mentioned gateway. For me, there's 3 main gateway bands that everyone who gets into rock music seems to like early on. AC/DC, Aerosmith, and Kiss. They're the gateway bands where when you first get into rock music, they get your attention, you're a fan. And then that invites you into a whole new world where you start, you go deeper than Aerosmith, right? But you like Aerosmith early on.
Do you think there's anything about those 3 bands in particular? Like, I resonated. It's immediately when you said them, like, yeah. But could you pinpoint just one?
Yeah, you know what? Okay, Kiss is different, but AC/DC and Aerosmith, they're bands that can get away with like every AC/DC drum beat's kind of the same, all their riffs. That's
true, actually.
They interviewed Brian Johnson one time and said, "Do you know you have 14 albums that sound exactly alike?" He goes, "No, we have 15 albums that sound exactly alike." But somehow that works for AC/DC. Like other bands like Nickelback, I hate. I very strongly dislike Nickelback because it's like the formula is not as good. I don't know, but one of my biggest pet peeves in music is just following the same formula. Like the Rolling Stones always had a different sound on every album, and it was always good. But I love originality, but somehow AC/DC is just able to do that. ZZ Top, in a way, is able to do that, where they kind of, it's similar, but it works. It's just good, like peanut butter and chocolate. You don't need to add to it. It's just good. So that's my theory on them. Kiss is an affirmation. They're over the top. They're kind of ridiculous. It's the theatricality of it, kind of like taking Alice Cooper and David Bowie, and it's a show. So that appeals. It's like living a fantasy, right? If you listen to the Destroyer album, their lyrics are all about rock star. It's what modern day hip hop does, Like it's like hyping yourself up, but that could be misunderstood. It's really an affirmation. You're creating the life you want to live in doing that. So I think that's what made Kiss a big deal, And these aren't even 3 of my most favorite bands. I'm just saying you have to notice and appreciate.
Yeah.
And that's why they're a gateway to me, because most people I know, they don't end up being your favorite band most of the time if you get serious about music, but, it gets you started, My
very
opinion,
true. No, very true. And look, those gateways are so synonymous or individual for anybody. But, sometimes you go through, genres or bands, etc., and immediately some spring to mind straight away, whether that's through, their popularity or sales in numbers. People nowadays might look at, modern artists or bands like, say, Ed Sheeran. He's kind of a Marmite artist, if you either love him or you kind of hate him. There doesn't seem to be kind of middle ground, but his numbers speak for themselves because of the modern I don't know, style or taste, whatever he's clicked onto. But when you think about, you know, other genres and gateways, you say, you've mentioned three that, you know, there might be some listeners' favourite bands and go, yes, AC/DC, or yes, you know, Aerosmith. But, you know, I myself saw last Tuesday, live in concert, the Bootleg Beatles, who are
cool.
the you know, proclaimed world's best Beatles tribute band. And the way they do it was they go through the different albums of the Beatles consequentially. You know, they change all the costumes and mannerisms and everything, but the stylist change you can see throughout each album. And they were only going for what, you know, a good decade, 10 years or so, but within that was so much change stylistically and whether instrumentation, or call it what you will, that you know the show was like a marvel to take on in that regard, regardless of whether you know the songs or not. And indeed, I saw an interview with the band who said, you know, as you said, people are familiar with the early kind of stuff, but you know, as soon as, say, the Beatles, for example, stopped touring, then people lost connection, disconnected, whatever. But that, I think, again, comes back to the beauty of music, that at any point where you capture these people. Now, we're talking about bands that, you know, the Beatles started, 60 years ago, yet still running strong today. That gateway is formed at anybody at any point. So
I have my own theory. My own theory about the Beatles' success.
Oh, here we go.
Baby boomers were in their teenage years,
yeah.
And most of the Beatles songs are love songs, at least half of them.
Yeah.
So it's
especially
the soundtrack of that era's life.
Yeah.
You know, in coming into their own, and you know, 60s. What a great decade. Starts off doo-wop is kind of, you know, the thing, and then rock and roll was already emerging, and then by the end of the decade, you have something like Pink Floyd.
I know.
Night and day, right? Like, man, Moody Blues, like you have psychedelic rock and stuff. It got crazy in such a good way. I think the 60s was the most transformative decade of music ever. It just went in all these different directions that never were even thought of before, you know?
Absolutely. And it's within the span of the decade itself. Like, you know, and then from there, you got so many bands and artists that hark back to that era of music, whether that's through a band or, you know, the style they're looking for. And that's kind of the wonder that you have of it, of like, okay, you could take a modern artist, you know, my tastes revolve essentially around the 90s, 80s, etc., but they all hark back to, well, we started from, you know, Beatles, Stones, Hendrix, all these kind of people. And to see them still go on to today, like, was it on the other day? I saw someone said on YouTube that a rare concert footage of Jimi Hendrix playing somewhere was just unearthed with like a few, you know, unheard tracks, and it's like even today you're still, you know, and he, you know, Jimi Hendrix is only around musically for what, 2, 3, 4 years max, yet the impact he left, it's just incredible, right?
Well, he had people like Clapton and Jeff Beck saying, "Whoa, we got to up our game." You know,
right?
Nothing but Jeff Beck, who, in my opinion, way better than Hendrix, and Clapton. I love Cream more than I love Hendrix, but Hendrix made all of that happen.
Yeah.
You know? So I have to tell my story though, to give you context of me and music, because this is like, I think this is the most important. So I grew up. My dad was a music fan. I guess that comes from being a teenager. More often than watching TV as a family, we'd be like, after dinner, he'd just play records. And that sometimes would go till, you know, late at night. But that's how I grew up. At least, I'll say more than half of the time, 60% of the time, we're listening to records at night. And there's a lot of Bob Dylan. It's a lot of Led Zeppelin. So I don't remember ever hearing that stuff for the first time. That's natural. Joe Cocker, when I'm 4 years old, I remember my parents playing that kind of stuff, you know. So before the internet, my dad had 5,000 records. So that was kind of like I could just go deep into it, right? So when I was 10, here's the biggest turning point of my entire life, where I would, like, you wouldn't be talking to me. It'd be like there'd be some other guy doing something else. But like, this has had the biggest impact on who I am as a person. As Scotty Ian said with Anthrax, if it wasn't for the first 5 Black Sabbath albums, I wouldn't be here, right? Well, that's the perfect way to say it. So here's how that happened. When I was 10, I got my first CD player. It's the first CD player in the house. Dad had all those records. He wasn't ready to convert yet. I didn't have a collection, so CD player CD was new. Not everyone I knew had a CD player, right? So But everyone was getting them. All my friends were starting to get them. So I subscribed to BMG, 8 CDs for a penny. You probably remember something like that. It was a deal. It was in the newspaper. Then they start to send you one every month, and it's a subscription thing. So I picked 8 different CDs, and one of them was a big hit at the time, major hit. It was like the first, after Walk This Way, the first rap rock song that was like meant to be rap rock. Epic, Faith No More. You want it all, but you can't have it, right? You remember that song, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I got that album, The Real Thing. Great album, right? And I kept playing this song called War Pigs. And my dad said, oh, that's a Black Sabbath song. I'm like, no, this is Faith No More. He goes, it's a Black Sabbath song. I looked at the little booklet. Yeah. They were all written by the same guys except the last song, War Pigs, written by 4 other guys. Right? Iommi, Osborne, Butler, Ward. Who are these guys? Okay, that's not the guys in this band.
Yeah.
So my dad's like, oh, I got their albums in the basement, right? So he had crates of albums. So I went through, probably the first 1,000 albums, pulled out Master of Reality, looked in the back, no War Pigs, set it aside. Then I go through another 2,000 albums, pull it out, Black Sabbath, the original album, turn it over. No War Pigs. Let me set that aside. I'm trying to find War Pigs, right?
It must be somewhere.
No joking. The 5,000th album, it was the back album at the back of the last crate.
Wow.
Probably because my dad had it in the front when it was turned the other way, right? So I grabbed that back album, opened it up, because the other 2 you had to flip over. This one opened up, saw song number 1, War Pigs, right? So I pull the album out, wait till no one's around. I'm home from school first. My mom's not there. Dad's still at work. Play it. This is so much better than the thing. Side A. War Pigs, Paranoid, Planet Caravan, Iron Man. Whoa. What a freaking best side of any album, if you ask me. Right? So I called my buddy after listening to that side once. John, get over here, man. You got to hear this. So he gets on his bike. It's a 10-minute bike ride. He comes over, and we're fans, right? We're like, it blew my mind. So I'm playing that side of that album for 6 weeks. And one of my dad's workers, Rick Howard, who's like an uncle to me, right? He's more of an uncle than any of my uncles are. Yeah. He's like, oh, cool. You like Sabbath, man, right? And he's all into it. And then after a couple weeks, he comes over one time, and I'm playing Iron Man, and he's like, flip the album over. And I'm like, is the other half as good as the first? Yeah. So then I flipped it over, and you got Electric Funeral and, Hand of Doom, Rats Out and Fairies Wear Boots. I mean, awesome freaking, what a great album. So that really did change my destiny. For the next 2 years, I would listen to okay, here's my regimen. So I had to listen to Black Sabbath, the first album, every day. When I got home from school, I'd listen to Black Sabbath, then I'd listen to Paranoid, the album I'm talking about. Then I'd listen to one other Sabbath album of my choosing, and then I'd listen to an Ozzy album. After that, whatever I felt. That was my, what it took to be a fan in my 12-year-old opinion or my 11-year-old opinion,
So was that something you just sort of consciously did because something just grabbed you about those albums and the artist about it, the fact that you
loved
played
it
this
so
regiment
much.
every
I
day.
just wanted to hear it all the time,
Wow.
Yeah. So, but what's funny is for at least a year and a half, maybe 2 years, I didn't listen to anything else, just Black Sabbath. And then one day I realized, okay, I can like other music, but then Black Sabbath would be my favorite. And then Judas Priest became my second favorite band. And then I got into all the other, then I was talking to this girl who, at 10, this was the love of my life, right? Really good friend for this day. But I used to play Black Sabbath for her, and she'd play Madonna like a virgin and teach me to dance to it. I did that for the girl.
That's
right?
Amazing.
So it was our Friday nights were Black Sabbath and Madonna. It's kind of funny. And
never thought you'd hear those two put together in any concept, but there we go.
I love Madonna to this day for that reason. But she she actually inspired me when I told her, like, okay, now I'm listening to Judas Priest. She knew I was only Black Sabbath for a long time. Like, I didn't want to hear anything else. And then she turned me on to like Alice in Chains and some of that kind of stuff, Soundgarden, what was current at the time, So then it got cooler. I mean, Alice in Chains for me was the grunge band, if you can call it grunge. It's ridiculous that it was grunge, but that was the band in like 1991 that was like, I didn't like Nirvana right away, but I loved Alice in Chains the first time I heard them.
Well, that is such a succinct example of the gateway that you had to music first through the albums. Having to dig through 5,000 albums to find the one you wanted, and then having your mind blown through that, through just consciously then, right, I'm just going to replay this on repeat. I had the same with, Oasis here. I just heard, for me, it wasn't even a side of an album. It was just roll with it. I'm like, what is this? And just played over and over. And a funny quirk I had, I still haven't worked out to this day, was I heard that on my Walkman at the time. I did the whole thing of finding it on the radio somewhere, hitting play and record on a tape player and record that way. But for some reason, and I've only sussed this out recently, is that my Walkman was playing the song in half a key higher. So I had no idea what happened. But the I don't know what it was, the chord progression or the energy of it. It was just, it's a 4-minute long song, but it just, something sparked off. Like, what is this song? Now, interesting, straight away, it didn't mean that I looked for all of Oasis discography and this kind of thing. That came a little bit later. But what I loved about your journey was that you'd played these albums on repeat. Then you came to that realization, okay, I can like other bands. Just kind of giving yourself that freedom to do so. But then you happen to come across people that you naturally draw into you, like your uncle, like your friend that introduced you to other albums, other bands. You synced with theirs. And that's the beauty of, I think, when we share our stories and anchors with people, the possibility of finding those that resonate, like this conversation, is, I think, is so unique to music. And that's half the reason I put this show together, is like, if I've got stories about whatever it is, and I'm sure we'll go on to more now, we've all got similar starts, but at the same time, everyone's start is different. But it's always going to be, I remember just listening to this song or this album, and that's it. So for you, it's, Ozzy, Black Sabbath. How cool is that?
My connection to Oasis is pretty special.
I was going to wait to ask that, because you did, because Brian mentioned to me beforehand that ask me in the podcast at some point when I saw Oasis in 1999 when I was broke. Okay, that's going to be a great question. But I thought, do you know what, as you brought it up, let's hear it.
So this was around 94, and I mean, correct, yeah. I mean, their first album came out before then, right? But
94 was the first year.
I had seen them on MTV a little bit, but never paid attention to them. I was aware of who they were. But so I turned 16 in 96, so I was 14 at the time. Right. So a couple of my friends who were older got their licenses, had their cars. So it's my first group of people that we're cruising with, and we're going to places we've never been, like,
yes.
like pushing those limits, staying out longer than we're supposed to. But we're cruising. We're just going out having a good time. Like, we want to go to the movies, but we go to the movies that are an hour away at some other better theater than what we have. So we're just cruising, and it was a whole scene, right? We're just having a lot of fun. And Adam Pekka was the kid with the car. And I turned him into a Dylan fan. So he ended up going to Dylan concerts and stuff with us, but he drove. So, but we're driving, and there's like, it's kind of like the moment from Almost Famous, when Tiny Dancer's playing and there's sunlight's coming in and they're singing it like their life story. Well, Live Forever came on in the car, and there's like 6 of us. I never heard it. And the other guys in there were singing it like it was their life story, oh, maybe I don't really want to know. And it was just that moment of like, fucking yeah, man, this is awesome. I look around and time froze. I'm like, this is a moment to remember. Like, I literally remember thinking something like that. Like, let me just record this. And then as soon as that song ended, who is that? Oh, Oasis. I mean, I went home and bought Definitely Maybe. And it might have been a little later than when it first came out, because I mean, right away, right after that, I mean, Champagne Supernova took over MTV, and I had What's the Story Morning Glory. To the point where, like, when I was in Bali 10 years ago, I was in this place, Canteen 21, for 100 miles in either direction. It's the only nightclub. Saturday night, hundreds of people are in there. They had this band that was awesome. And they started singing Don't Look Back in Anger, right? And the guy doesn't know half the words. I'm in the front row singing every word. He said, come on
Brilliant.
up. Right?
That's amazing.
So I'm singing with the band, Don't Look Back in Anger. I get off and everyone's like, oh, that was awesome. That was awesome. So every time I'm in there every Saturday, halfway through, they'd be like, okay, my friend from Hawaii is going to come sing. And they play Don't Look Back in Anger, right? So that became my thing when I was in Bali. But you wanted to know about 1999 Oasis. So 1999, I'm working as a pizza delivery guy. I'm in college. I'm broke. I'm in debt. I'm making $700 a week, but my bills are $800. I was just getting slowly behind, struggling. Oasis. Me and my brother are fans. We listen to Oasis all the time, right? Those 2 albums are a big deal. So it's like 99. Radio's promoting it, and I don't have the money to go. But I have about 20 blank CDs sitting around, and I just downloaded. Napster was a brand new kind of thing. I just downloaded their latest album that they were touring. So I made 20 burnt CDs of that album and said, okay, well, we'll just go and sell them for $5 or $10 a piece to get tickets, right?
Oh, what a brilliant idea.
I was at the Tower Theater in Philadelphia, and this is really cool. The first guy that we walked up to and said, hey, man, I got Oasis's new album, $5. I'm trying to earn money to get tickets to get in, and I'm broke, So I figured I had these blank CDs, you could buy the album. He goes, dude, I've got 2 extra tickets I came here to give away. So my brother and I didn't sell them, right? I didn't sell one. So that was pretty cool, So that's kind of like, I've won more contests for free tickets on the radio than anyone I know. It's just somehow if you love music,
things move for you. Absolutely. Look, for a long while, for me personally, I thought that, right, if I've cottoned on to, guitar music, guitar bands, and I'm getting so much out of it, from the joy of listening to, understanding what the lyrics are, or the feeling, or the unity that you feel, I'm like, I've got to find like-minded people, or have the people around me share that kind of thing. But for me personally, that was a very difficult journey, shall we say, because people around me, that's my friends, family, etc., didn't really get it. They were like, it's too loud, it doesn't make sense. And it was more it became a kind of a personal thing. So it's like, for liking a certain band or music, then you kind of got I wouldn't say ousted, but more kind of like everybody else, like the the hip hop R&B stuff, and I began to develop a bit of a beef with it, of like, okay, that's rubbish. What I listen to is more satisfying, etc. So to come to the moment you do, where like I can like other music, or even not convince other people to like my kind of music, eventually came about. But when you talked about the unity that it brings, and the fact that you get these opportunities that come along, like I quickly hark back to after Oasis split, and Noel Gallagher became a solo artist and started his own band that he was giving away, not he himself, but his management. When his first album was about to come out, they said you could win tickets to a listening party. So the whole, before it's released to the public, you get to listen to it in a bar or whatever. And I just entered, try your luck, you never know. And lo and behold, I won a ticket. So not only did I get to hear Noel's first album before anybody else, but you get the people that were there, the other fans that were there, that you share that music with it. I always akin it to music versus like sports where like you go to a ground or somewhere that there's a certain section of the audience that aren't there for the same reason you are. You're on there to see your team win, they want to see their team win. But music, everybody wins. You're all there for the same reason. You're not going to go to a concert and go, boo, they're rubbish. You don't do that. Well, you might do, that's up to you. But you're all there for the same reason. And the stories that came out there, I'm still now in touch with them today. those are things that, you know, only music can bring you. And it's like, and when you mentioned in the car, first time hearing Live Forever, 5 of your friends singing along, and you're like, I've got to record this. That's the ethos that the song was written in, per Noel. That's like, people listen to that and go, that's from like from husband to wife, or wife to husband, or partners, or girlfriend, boyfriend. No, it's for you and your mates. Like, we see things they'll never see. Is literally about you and your mates going out, having a good time. And now even today, whenever it's at a Liam concert or a Noel concert, that's one of the songs where neither Noel or Liam have to sing. The crowd take over, and it brings you back to like, everybody's here for this one unifying song or moment.
There's just songs that grab you. The Trooper from Iron Maiden. I mean,
yes.
Man, when I heard that, what a life-changing experience, right? Like, whoa, like your mind explodes.
Can you?
I'll just say.
Let me ask you very quickly. Sorry. Can you tap into why The Trooper? I tell you for why, because it's one of my favorite Maiden songs. But when if you look at the lyrics, for example, people are like, well, he's talking about, you know, like being a trooper, a soldier, and it's like, yes, but you're not just meant to look at it that way. But it's the whole power of the song, the delivery.
What?
Can you articulate it better?
I can. I mean, as this is my favorite kind of conversation, and it's also probably why Judas Priest and Iron Maiden are two of my most favorite bands. The Trooper is just a really good example. You Got Another Thing Coming is a good example. A lot of Judas Priest does the same thing, and Iron Maiden, lots of Iron Maiden does it. Here's what it is. First off, honestly, as a man, as a guy, there's a testosterone thing that some women may appreciate, but and I'm not meaning it to be a sexist thing. There's just something about a dude that really, I mean, whether it's culturally programmed or not, doesn't matter. There's something about a dude who, there's part of us that wants to go into battle and conquer something. And that's why sports are popular, right? So, like, and that is visceral. When you're 13, those hormones are activated, right? And you're coming into a place where you don't have, like, your choices have been made for you by your parents, and then the teacher, everyone's telling you what to do, and you're wanting to rebel against that and be yourself. And what, you know, I don't know. How could you become great if you're not going to do that to a certain level, right? To be dissatisfied with your current surroundings. And like, it's just part of the path, right? You mellow out when you get a little bit older, but it's that. But the whole, what I love about The Trooper, you know, you listen to the lyrics, first off, the feeling of it, it's amped up. It's like, if I'm training for wrestling or something, it just forget the words. There's an excitement. That riff is so freaking cool. It's powerful, right? But the lyrics, right? You take my life, but I'll take yours too. So the first line, it's about believing in something that's worth dying for, right? You fire a musket, but I'll run through you. And standing against impossible odds and not fearing that. Super powerful, right? Okay, on the one level, you could say that's about war, and you know, you could point out what's wrong about that, but it's, you know, I see it a completely different way as well, you know, and it has both meanings, and that's all good music has multiple meanings. So, for instance, the Kinks, top 5 band for me, right? One of the best ever groups. I love the optimism of Ray Davies and the genius of his lyrics. Lola, though, my favorite song, Lola, from them. Well, one of my favorites. The last line, okay, Vishad, I've never mentioned this to you before. The last line of Lola. The whole song is about, on the one hand, a transgender connection. The guy's hooking up with a manly woman, but it's very ambiguous, okay? If you just listen to the service, you think he's hooking up with a man posing as a woman. But actually, if you listen to the lyrics, it's ambiguous. It could also be a naive boy getting into the big city and a woman who's worldly, who the roles are reversed. He's more like the woman, she's more like the man. It makes perfect sense that way. But in the last line, I know what I am and I'm glad I'm a man, and so's Lola. Now, if you don't listen to that carefully, you could say it said Lola's a man. I know what I am and I'm glad I'm a man, and so's Lola. It does not say that Lola's a man. Is Lola a man, or is Lola also glad that he's a man? It's ambiguous.
Oh,
and it's
that's good.
It's so that's what I love about words. And
I think I've just found the clip for the show, so to advertise. So wow.
No, that's what makes me a copywriter and a persuasion person. Like the English can do that. I've just marveled at that. Judas Priest, my favorite example, right? Breaking the Law.
Yeah.
I love songs that start with like an action movie. The guy's dangling off the cliff and, he jumps on the moving plane. Like, what? Wait a minute. You need to gather yourself. Well, Breaking the Law starts that way. There I was completely wasting, out of work and down. All inside, it's so frustrating as I drift from town to town. Feel as though nobody cares if I live or die. So I might as well begin to put some action in my life. Man, you're right there.
It hits you, doesn't it? You literally just get bashed by it right there.
Okay, I understand this guy, and you know what? I've been there. I feel that, and okay, that's the whole thing. It's an emotional connection, right? It's not an intellectual thing. There's an intellectual component to it, and you could be intellectually drawn to it, but there's a heart, there's a feeling, and that's what it is. If we're resisting our emotions, we stay stuck, right? If you can express how you feel, you actually don't need to feel that way anymore. It releases it. And that's what a lot of people don't understand about heavy metal. Music, listening to their frustrated state isn't causing more of that. It's letting you to say, you know what? They've expressed how I feel better than I can. And now I can let it go. It's
proper outlet. And you're right. You're right to make that distinction of particularly like heavy metal, death metal, industrial metal, call it what you will, or even those bands and genres. People shirk away from that idea because of the aesthetics of it. Oh, it's loud. It's got a growly voice. It sounds menacing. It's about death. It's about dodgy topics.
It's powerful.
It's incredibly powerful. The expression is, as you say, it's like. I might not be able to articulate it or convey it, but that's exactly what is happening inside me. Right now, I hark back to probably 5-6 years ago. I started to connect with the German band Rammstein. Not excessively. I don't know all their albums and songs, etc. But as we mentioned before, music has this funny habit of putting you together with people or finding people that resonate with you out of nowhere. And I found someone in my family network who was into Rammstein. I'd heard of maybe one or two songs I'd heard of them, but she's like, oh, you got to get into it. And she gave me this list of songs and said, go check them out. And again, it was just like one was like fast and furious, another was like slower, another one had a crazy chord structure, another one was like on a really dark topic, but all of them had their own resonation, power, influence. And when we discussed I like this one, I like that one, you literally were able to pull apart what it was about it, as you said, whether it's from an intellectual point of view about what it might mean, etc. But I'm just like the feelings you get when it serves almost as that significance and ego for me. If if someone else gets this, it's great that I get it. But when you connect with others, you're not alone. Exactly. It's so, right. And the beauty is it's different for everybody, as we keep saying. They're like, we're talking
that's
about...
all genres. The Bee Gees, you should be dancing. It's not just about, right?
Absolutely.
But for the inner part of you that wants to dance, how deep is your love? Right? These are different emotions. But the Bee Gees are as powerful as Iron Maiden, if you ask me.
Yeah.
It's a different emotion.
100%.
And I love both of them for different reasons. The reason why I love the Bee Gees, I grew up where heavy metal was my standard. But what made me love heavy metal was the extremeness of it. So in a world where heavy metal is the norm, actually the Bee Gees were like heavy metal to me. They were so wild and outrageous for what I consider normal. Disco was, in a lot of ways, the opposite, but that's what attracted me to it. It was so ridiculous for me to be listening to disco. That was the attraction of it. If that makes sense. Because I like...
Because your system's like, wait, should I be liking this? But you do.
Well, bottom line, if it's good and you like it, that's all that, who cares? I remember being 12 and Benny and the Jets was on the radio, Elton John. And at the time, I didn't want to admit that I liked Elton John. And my dad's singing along to it, and I'm not. And he goes, "Well, you don't like the song?" I'm like, "No, I hate Elton John." He goes, "This is a good song," and I'm like, "Okay, it is." But one thing I wanted to go back to this, I wanted to make sure that I was able to talk about this, because for me, in music, we've already talked about this a little bit, kind of like when I was listening to Live Forever. And you had mentioned something, Vishal, but I forget how you said it, where it's the story about the music. So here's my favorite story about this. So we're going to Boy Scout camp, and I'm 13 at the time. And Mr. Sanson was one of the Boy Scout leaders. And it's me, Chris Smith, and Adam Bliss driving to this camping trip an hour away. Okay. He's got, for the first time, honey mustard and onion pretzels, which now they're in the grocery store every time you go there. It's like a standard snack. But it was the first time I ever had those. He had this root beer from the 70s that was craft root beer, really good stuff. And he goes, "Okay, guys, I've got a special album for you." He played Ziggy Stardust, Bowie, right? Now, he would pause it between songs and talk about when he was a teenager making out with a girl, and he would explain to us, "Okay, this song, here's what it's about." And he told us before the album played, hey, it's about a guy who's up in Mars, and they decide to get together, and they come to Earth kind of as Messiah figure, and, he told us this whole story about it. So the really cool thing about that is we drove up there, Ziggy Stardust, on a Friday night. We come back Sunday evening. We all go home. Monday morning, now I got home Sunday at 4 p.m. Monday morning, I go in an English class, second period. I go to Chris Smith. I pull out a CD. Dude, it's Ziggy Stardust, right? He, out of his backpack, he always had everything in his backpack, pulls out a cassette, Ziggy Stardust. We both bought it that night. We got our parents to take us to the mall or Kmart, right? At lunch, we all sat together. So I said, "Adam, you're never going to believe this, man. Me and Chris both got a copy of it." Adam pulled out a copy of it on CD, right? We all bought the album that night, right? Remains one of my favorite albums ever. And Bowie, I'll just say, Bowie dying, him and George Harrison really affected me. There's something missing. His presence on Earth is felt. I feel it. I've always felt a deep connection to Bowie. I mean, Mark Bolan died before I was dead from T-Rex. I mean, before I was alive. But he's another of that level. Bolan and Bowie, oh man. But Bowie he had that creativity.
Oh yeah.
He did things differently. And I loved it.
He did. One of the best qualities. He didn't really care to fit. As you said, you like originality. He was all about that. I don't give a monkey's what anybody else is doing.
He's a true artist,
Yeah, and you're right. When he passed, it's like, whoa, that is one. That's going to leave a big hole where he's gone. In terms of creativity, expressionism, just from his body of work and what people say about him, that he's definitely sorely missed. But I love that story again. This is what I think what music has the ability to do. When you form these anchors, they stay with you and they come out in so many ways. You have that instant urge that, right, I have to get the album. And concurrently, you find that your friends got it as well. Because you all got in that moment.
The one guy, Adam, actually killed himself when we were 27, right? So Adam was like a brother to me. People called me Adam, called him Brian, right? So one of my best friends, there's 5 people that I've ever been on the same page in life where we were that close. He's one of them. But he was a big Elvis fan and a big Black Sabbath fan, right? So we shared that. The Doors, he got me into the Doors, right? Huge Doors fan. So, but he killed himself when he's 27 on August 16th, Elvis's death anniversary, right? So what was pretty wild is actually I had called Chris, that third guy, that a couple months later, and he explained to me the whole story of Adam killing himself, right? So what's wild is the first song on Ziggy Stardust is called 5 Years. We've got 5 years, what a surprise. So on the 5th anniversary of Adam Bliss dying, killing himself, all I did was post that song, 5 Years. And then Smith, he's the only one that commented on it. He understood.
Yeah.
But we're bonded forever. Yeah. And it's a shame because, of all the people, actually Adam and I, he stole my girlfriend and we stopped being friends, right? We fought and it was over. But out of all the people, it'd be nice to have a beer with him or something, but he's not. But, it was, it's an important part of who I am also. But so Ziggy Stardust, bam. So my four younger brothers got to hear the story from me. So, I raised 4 diehard Black Sabbath fans. I raised 4 diehard Bowie fans, right? Because of me. Now, my dad made me a Dylan fan, made me a Zeppelin fan, right? That's because of my dad. I'm a Black Sabbath fan in a way because of my dad, but not because he encouraged me to listen to him. But 70s is my favorite decade of music. And it's because I grew up listening to 5,000 albums from the 70s.
And as you said, it's something that you weren't pressed into. You weren't you were just around. You mentioned that there wasn't a TV on. You just get the records out and play and enjoy that. It's a little bit similar to myself, really, where music would be around in some form, whether it's your parents just singing a line here and there out loud, whether we'd go to cultural shows where there'd be a tribute artist or whomever. And nowadays in the radio, they just switch to one of their stations and there's someone come up and it's like, they challenge each other. So go on then, what's, because they're into Bollywood, right? Or the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, all that kind of stuff. And like, go on then, what's this film from? And it's like, no, you're wrong. This is what I mean. That's what music gives you. You have that connection and then you can share it with other people. But at the end of the day, you form that connection. You're not coerced into one genre or whatever. And even if you were, like, whether say you take that further and your parents whomever played an instrument and it's like, no, you should learn as well because that's the thing, that's the path you're guided down. But even when you start that, it might well be, okay, well, I want to, you mentioned that that kind of rebellious nature comes out of you, your natural hormones, your natural instincts, that, no, I want to try this field or whatever, and I now interlink it to artists nowadays that you would never make the distinction of where they came from. Like, Bruce Dickinson is an airline pilot. There you guys, Eddie 77 everywhere. Brian May, he's a double, whatever, I don't know, what is he, a double major in astrology or double PhD or whatever he is. Like, the lead guitarist out of Queen is a double PhD person. It's like, what? And it's like, this is the marvel that you get from all walks of life, And the biggest thing, one of the biggest things that struck me with these artists is like, they're not coming from an area of like scarcity, of like, we're the only ones that can do it. They're like, I'm as regular as you and I. Now, there are some cynics that go, yeah, but they've got to say that kind of thing, haven't they? But it's like, when you look into their backstories through, I don't know, interviews, biography, documentary films, whatever, you like one that I really connected with was Walk the Line with Johnny Cash. You see him going to that record shop where you could just make a little vinyl for whatever it was, 50 cents or whatever it was. You get one go, and then he couldn't, the shops go, no, that's no good, and they go, no, play something else, and it's just through that it starts there, and it builds, and it's like, what a great story. There's none of this like, going on a TV show and, going through a talent contest, and I'd say contest, but, then you're put on stage that way. It's like, these are an organic, great stories. That's another thing that you tap into,
I've never heard this theory before, but it's my theory on why the British invasion happened.
Okay.
If you really think about it, though, okay, convergence of a couple things. Europe was destroyed in World War II, right? So kids as teenagers, like, the Jeff Becks and the Claptons and the Brian Mays, as teenagers, they're dealing with traumatized parents who were still picking up the pieces and, emotionally distant, right? And they're dealing with like poverty type situations because it hadn't been rebuilt fully yet. Meanwhile, America is booming. There's unprecedented optimism because, hey, they have all the contracts to rebuild all these factories that have been decimated, right? So America had this unfair advantage. It wasn't destroyed like Europe was, right? But Europe has this bleak kind of, stiff upper chin and all this, but that must have been a really tough situation to grow up in the aftermath of World War II. So what's an escape from that? Music. So because they were living the blues, they got into R&B music, the blues in America, and that just resonated. It was this is how I feel. And they just went into that. And look, to me, one of the most beautiful things that ever happened is American blues being filtered through the British, where these guys grew up with castles and the mystical aspect of, King Arthur and stuff, somehow blending with Mississippi Delta blues. Like it just created this really cool shit,
I like that.
I don't know how to, when you mix those two, you see, I grew up in America. The blues, it's like normal, right? Cowboys, that's American. It's exotic to people who aren't from here. It was just, it aroused their curiosity. Just like castles in England and all that was exotic to me, right? But to them, it just captured their imagination. And look what happened with it. They filtered it in, back, and it just took on its own life, But it wasn't easy for...
I was saying, that sounds like it needs a documentary made by you, Brian, to formulate your theory a bit more.
That's my theory on why the British invasion happened, and for a while, America couldn't really hold it. I mean, what's the best American band? Alice Cooper. I mean, the top 20 of my favorite bands are all British. I mean, they're just the best. But I heard someone else describe just something about the reservedness of British people, too, where in music, the Americans will fall off the cliff. We just go a little over the top. The British players know how to hold back and make you want a little, they don't fall off the cliff. They'll get it as far as it could go. And my dad explained this when I said, Dad, you saw Clapton. Yeah. What was it like to see Clapton? He goes, well, Clapton's a master. He could let loose and blow your mind at any second, but he holds back just enough to make you want more. And he doesn't give it to you. Yeah. That's the mastery, right? Not trying to impress people, but restraint is part of being a master. It's
a really good made point there, because immediately she was saying that, I was thinking of Bruce Springsteen, who I think he recently did a tour where he first of all changed the set list every night, and he had I think shows that last 3 hours long, and also a slot where he'd let people pick a song in a set list, which one of these do you want it, and he'd do the audience pick or something, and it's and she said, it's very giving, very bombastic and a big show. Even someone like Taylor Swift, doesn't her show go for 4 or 5 hours or 30 song list or whatever it might be? Good luck to her and all this kind of thing. But yeah, with British bands, it seems to be the whole, well, we'll do our slot, 90 minutes, whatever it is. Maybe do a 2-song encore if you're lucky. That's your lot. I see that in the world of TV as well. Many of our famous comedies, etc., many writers only did 2 series because they're well, we've exhausted the idea, and as you said, we want to leave the audience wanting more. Now, I remarked that in the space of something like The Simpsons that has gone on for was it now the 36th season? Still going. Still popular, still strong, but conversely with ours, you'd rarely find an English series going for, maybe, the really popular ones back in, 70s, 80s were 2-3 series long. 1 or 2 that were really popular went 7-8 series, but not in the
except
same
for Doctor
Simpsons
Who,
territory.
that just goes on. Except for Doctor Who, that just goes on forever.
Well, that's the beauty for them, is we'll just regenerate him, pick it back up again 20 years later. Oh, he's back again, That's one that keeps popping up. But you're right, the mix of styles, in particular, speaking as someone that, again, the tastes are obviously rooted in the 90s, and even the stories of how that movement happened, Britpop, which is where Oasis, etc., became famous. That scene in the mid 90s, a lot of documentaries that talk about that time in music was the whole. There was a cultural void at that point. We'd come from, England. Well, the UK, probably the end of the 80s was in a bleak state. Politics was on the floor. society was kind of tearing itself down a little, and
Depeche Mode reflects that.
Yeah, right, and yeah, exactly. But they mentioned bands like that. Some music commentator on the show, he said America and the UK have this kind of TikTok thing going between them. Not TikTok, the social media thing, the whole tick of a clock is like. He goes, quite often, for English bands to break America is harder because it's harder to crack America. But the opposite way is, well, we either take on board what they have or not really. So you mentioned things like Nirvana, although popular seemingly in America, because it captured that grunge movement, etc. And it was, that's the kind of figurehead band. Here it was like, well, we didn't really pick up on the kind of relative.
Bush was awesome. I liked Bush better than all that stuff back at the time.
Yeah.
And then Oasis.
Well, so on that point, they said, Oasis kind of kickstarted that movement to go, no, sod that. We don't need that kind of outlook or genre of it. You essentially celebrate Britishness. But Oasis never set out to do that. It was bands more like Blur, Suede, who captured that sort of British eccentricity.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
so
right.
Good.
Pulp, Radiohead, they captured that kind of British eccentricity with its imagery. Style, that was the cheekiness.
Suede was very Bowie-like,
exactly, and very underrated. They were there in the early, what you'd say, 1991.
The Beautiful Ones. I mean, that's one of my favorite songs ever. That's so good.
Animal Nitrate.
Yeah, the whole album, the whole.
Right, but that I'd say probably 4-year period, 93 to 97, was the one where we really celebrated Britishness to a hyper extent. But short-lived.
Here's a line from Bush. This line always grabbed me. That encapsulates what you just said. Should I fly to Los Angeles, find my asshole brother? Think about that. Right? So they were digging America there, but it was kind of cool. That's where the assholes live, in Los Angeles, right?
Okay, fair enough. But this is, I think, something we've probably not seen since then. Maybe on either side.
No, it's
just a short-lived period of like, I call that period, bias included, of we've not had a period like that since, where for the universe has come together, where you just nailed it in a lot of senses. Whether it's like cultural, political, sport, music, everything was like.
Nirvana was the last revolution.
Yeah,
we haven't had one
over there.
Nirvana.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, and. For here, I'd say Oasis were the same, but in '97, Be Here Now happened, all this kind of thing, and then
'90s was the last. Where now everything's trying to be a mixture of everything that came before. It's not really pushing. Song structure is degraded. Like there's 4 chords now.
Yeah.
And it's down to verse and chorus. There's no bridge left in popular music.
No solos.
The internet in a lot of ways have killed the music industry, but good music's out there. It's just the music industry doesn't promote it.
100%.
So your odds of getting, discovered by everyone. In my opinion, Cher using auto-tune killed music. It removed the blues influence because you don't have the flat 6 anymore. It's auto-corrected to the note in the major key. You lose the soul. Blues was breaking that rule from classical music. That's how we had the blues revolution. That's how we had rock music. But it's been taken out of rock music with auto-tune. And I'll be honest, I hate auto-tune. There's never one valid reason for it to be used in music, in my opinion. I'd rather hear a real voice. And I mean, come on, is Kurt Cobain, does he have a good voice? Not really. But is it soulful? And it's Bob Dylan. He's one of my favorites. But it's not because he has a perfect vocal style.
Exactly.
It's original. So, I really, to me, if it's got auto-tune in it, it's not music that I appreciate, really. I mean, it may sound okay, but to me, it's like selling your soul to the devil. You lose your soul, or McDonald's art. It's not a Picasso. It's just manufactured, for the masses. And
hate my numbers. Yeah, and as you said,
it's not so spicy. Everyone will like it, but then it loses its reason why you like it.
Again, you know, those little imperfections that you get in there, I can add to the record. We could probably go through a list of songs that have a little thing in there, like what was that? You know, not even an Easter egg, but it's more kind of like, you know, I know Guns N' Roses did it. You had multiple effects and sounds thrown in their songs. They're like, what's that doing in there? It's like, just leave it
Since
in.
I've Been Loving You from Zeppelin, the bass drum pedal squeaks the whole song. But if you didn't, it makes you feel like you're in a blues club somewhere and it's real. If you remove that, you would lose. And they did. They've re-edited it and taken it out. It's not the same. You know, but the original recording, it squeaks. But that squeak is just, it's a different rhythm. It's like, you know, you might want to add a kazoo or something to have an extra effect, right? Just once in a while. It has that extra element of realness.
That you just don't seem to get with today's music. Like, you know,
because it was recorded live. There was actually a microphone there recording the drums playing. You know,
well,
you know?
even you know, I mentioned music documentaries and stuff before. Like, you know, when I watched Supersonic, the Oasis documentary, and Bohemian Rhapsody, the Queen documentary, and watching a little bit of the Beatles Get Back sessions. You know, that archive footage they found of like just the story, the beginnings of itself. You know, there was a band that literally everybody knew in the world, split up for all intents and purposes. They didn't now like each other. It's difficult to get them all together. Now you got to hone and write and record an album in a 2-3 week window, ready to perform live to an audience after years of not being together. And just I've hardly started to watch it, but just there's 4 guys, regular guys, sitting around eating toast, and there you just then create one of the timeless albums. Stories that, you know, you've all heard of McCartney saying, you know, he dreamt up yesterday going, I'm sure that's one of your songs, and the guys are like, no, none of us have written it. He wrote it in a dream. What?
Yeah, scrambled eggs was the original lyric, right?
Yeah,
Scrambled eggs.
Exactly. But these are these moments where you just go, okay, wow, it literally, there's, as you said, there's no auto tune, and look, the grandeur of the occasion, like, you know, the instrumentation and stuff like that is going to be present, you know, in those kind of bands. But the simplicity of it, you know, what was it in Bohemian Rhapsody where Brian May starts going, I want to do a song where the band get involved, and I've started off with, and then everybody else just builds along with it. That's it. Simple 3-beat clap. And that's it.
Something that repeats itself, and then you build off that. Hey, we have symphonies like that. Dun, 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 dun.
Exactly.
Dun, dun, dun. The whole thing is that explored in different ways. You know, dun, 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 dun. It's a faster, you know, like the next line after that. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. The next one. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. It's just the faster of that. The whole thing unfolds from there. It's, you know, it's a riff, it's a motif. That's like, you know, that's why I love Iron Man so much. You know, dun, 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 or Smoke the Water. That's the same thing. Beethoven's original heavy metal, really, right? Bach, original heavy metal.
Yes. I've said that so many times. Beethoven, the original heavy metal man. Some of it. There's a chap on YouTube who does heavy metal covers of Beethoven.
Oh, it's totally heavy metal, though. You know, like classical music. That's the thing. Classical music and heavy metal are like heavy metal is modern classical music.
Yes,
you know,
but you know, in your own head when you see that or experience it from the original classical, but when you see it translated onto guitar, or like they actually play heavy metal classical, like wow, this guy he played
like Ingvar.
I forget the name, Requiem of something of Beethoven, but then he played Moonlight Sonata, the Ninth Symphony. Is like wow, but not just like, you know, copying note for note what the original was, but he's got all sorts of layering and soloing going on there, and just incredible fretwork. I'm like, goodness me.
That's the beauty when you really know the music. You can forget about like getting the notes right, and you like superimpose and change it, and it's hard to explain, but like you can end up with something like a reggae Stairway to Heaven. Yeah, it's still Stairway to Heaven, but it transforms into something else, and that's what I love about playing music, is to take that theme, but then you modify it radically. It's something else, but it still has that original quality of recognizably the thing that you're playing, but it can be pretty out there, pretty different.
And then you make it your own.
Yeah,
your own interpretation, and probably a conversation another time, but the advance of AI that lets you do even more in terms of music production. There's so many examples now of what would it be like if Bob Marley sang a Dylan number, what would it be like if John Lennon sang a Oasis number, or whatever. It's the possibilities are just
really cool stuff.
Indeed. Brian, I wonder if we could just finish with just one last question. Is that we talked about emotions and music interlinking before, and how certain songs are expressions or vehicles of them. Do you have a particular emotion to song connection for you, like a particular emotion that a certain song can resonate, or even a band that resonates for you?
It's funny because there's such a wide range of emotions, right? Like literally, it's kind of like every emotion that I can think of is expressed differently. So to answer your question, okay, I'll just put this on a spectrum of three of my favorite artists, and I'll just explain it this way. You've got Bob Dylan on the one end, pure best songwriter ever in my opinion, more on the intellectual side of the spectrum, but not purely intellectual. Then in the middle, you have Ray Davies from the Kinks, right? I mean, just as smart as Dylan, but he has a little more sarcasm, a little more humor, a little more sentimental, whereas Dylan was more idealistic. But Ray still has the idealism, but the sentimentality. And then you go over here to Frank Zappa, absurdity, total sense of humor, ridiculousness, every bit as smart as Dylan or Ray Davies, but it's all satirical. None of it's made to be taken seriously. But at the same time, he's doing that in a serious way. Anyone else trying to be like Zappa would just be stupid, would be ridiculous. He gets away with absurd, but seriously absurd and wonderful. So I see it as a spectrum. Dylan has his own humor. He has his own absurdity. He doesn't take himself purely seriously. But it's like a range, three geniuses, and I see Ray Davies as being somewhere in between. Three of my favorites for different reasons. But yeah, Zappa, way like just so absurdly funny. Ray Davies somewhere in the middle. So emotionally, there's three different emotions here. If I just want to laugh, and it's like it's ridiculous, I'll pick Zappa. If what I love about Ray Davies is he lets me experience a life I've never lived as if it were mine. Singing about the Village Green Preservation Society, life in England before the 60s, right? The good old, I feel like I lived that through him, even though I haven't been there, or come dancing, just like the belly on his sister going out for dances every Saturday night. Not my experience, but I can relate very much like my experience of being a teenager, younger person, and Dylan, more like the way the world should be, and the problems with just helping you see through maybe some of the bullshit that maybe people don't talk about. Mm-hmm. But also Judas Priest actually tells it like it is. Megadeth, help you. It's the truth. Yeah, that's why it's also not popular. It's the truth. 98% of people don't want to know the truth. That's why lies have power. If you really wanted to believe the truth, there would be no such thing as a lie. We only believe lies because we want to. Honestly, think about it.
Wow, that's quite the sentence to end the show on. But I can't believe again how quick that hour has gone. And
yeah, it was fun.
I've had so much fun. Again, it's always a joy to host this show and have great guests on like Brian. To share these conversations and ideas with. Brian, if you just want to give a quick shout out to where people might find you to connect more with you on what you do, feel free to share.
Yeah, just come find me on my Facebook profile. You can ask Vishad if you don't see me directly, but if I see this, you'll just look in the comments. I'll probably be there.
Fantastic. So for those watching or listening, you can find Brian's soundtrack that he will kindly share with us in the description or comments below wherever you're watching this. And if you could just give you a second to like and comment and all that good stuff on the show, it helps me out, helps everybody out as well. And if you yourself want to be a guest on the show, there'll be a sign up link to come along and share your stories like Brian has. And I'm sure we're going to be doing this again in the future, because there's a lot more we could share in this space. But Brian, thank you so much again for being on the show, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Soundtrack of Your Life. Please do like the video or podcast, comment with your thoughts below, subscribe to the channel, and sign up to be a guest on the show. Feel supersonic.